Welcome to the Veteran Spouse Network podcast, brought to you in collaboration with Coming Home Well. I'm your host, Hannah O'Brien, both a veteran spouse and the program manager for the Veteran Spouse Network. On each episode of our show, I will host different guests to learn more about the stories, unmet needs, and resources available to our military and veteran families. We're the show that's making space for your stories, so that here you know you're never alone. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this month's episode of the Veteran Spouse Network podcast. It's December, and that means we are knee deep into the holiday season. And while the holidays can be a joyous time where we're relaxing and celebrating and spending time with our families, it can also be a challenging time. It can be stressful, it can be sad, and it can even be lonely. And if you're an active duty or veteran family, there may be some unique factors at play that can tip the scales a bit and make it a little bit more challenging. But that doesn't mean there aren't ways to navigate and manage those difficult pieces to bring the enjoyment back into the season. So with that in mind, I am very excited to introduce our guest today, Emma Martin, who's going to share her own story and talk a bit about some of those unique military veteran family considerations that they face when navigating the holidays. So Emma is a veteran spouse. She's also a peer leader with us here at the Veteran Spouse Network and is the CEO and founder of Full Focus Coaching in Florida. So Emma, we're so happy to have you here with us today, and I'd love to just turn it over to you to have you tell us a bit about you and your family.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Honestly, I wish we had some more resources like this when we were active duty in the earlier years because we were young. My husband and I met at a high school, and I think we were 17 when we married, had our first kid at 17. It was July, we had our first son, and then 2001, September 11th happened. And I think pretty much till almost his 20-year career in the Army, he spent deployment after deployments back to back. And we have 4 kids. We actually have 2 now in high school. We have 2 serving active duty. I have a daughter actually stationed in Colorado and one at Fort Liberty, which is former Fort Bragg in North Carolina. I think a little bit about, our background, I guess, is, we had kids young. We had both came from different family lines. His mom was actually a minister. My family, my grandpa was a pastor, but the family dynamics were totally different, and what all that means. And I guess we'll get more into that as we get further in. But it was very difficult being young and being that we were at war and being that we both had no idea what we were doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, stack everything on top of each other. And if I'm right, y'all got out in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, he just retired 2 years ago, and now he got out of the Army and now works for the Air Force. And we're stationed, not stationed anymore, but we live outside of MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida.
Very cool. And yeah, you're absolutely right. As we talk about the holidays, family dynamics are a big piece of that, whether you're military veteran or just any family. But before we get into that, I mean, holidays can be a fun time. So I'd love to hear what your favorite part of the holiday season is.
Favorite part, I would say it's probably we used to get with our family in Tennessee. So when we were stationed at Fort Campbell, we would actually go up to Opry Mills and actually tour the lights there. And then they have a river walk. So it really was about spending time with family, I think is kind of my family tradition. It shifts over time, but yeah, holding strong to that.
Yeah, I think you're not alone in that. I think that is a big part, whatever that family looks like, and I'm sure it's different for everyone, and we may talk about some about that too. I know I totally agree. For me, it's definitely family, and that changes over time, how that looks, how you interact, and especially when your own family is going through major changes of their own. So I thought, I think military family life and veteran family life are very different. So I thought we'd kind of start off by talking about active duty lifestyle and how that kind of impacts holiday season challenges, exciting things, all of it, and then kind of shift into talking about how things have changed since y'all have gotten out. So thinking about when you guys were active duty, what do you think were some of the bigger highlights of things that were challenging when it came to the holiday season?
I think the biggest challenge was recreating what the family dynamic would be and how you would do the holiday events. Like, if they were deployed, which he was often deployed on major holidays, right? Like how I handled the situation was in regards to, were we going to still continue the traditions or not?
Mhm.
We did. We still did things like normal, but it still was challenging because you knew the person was missing, right? So it was just, you still felt alone, but you still felt whole with parts of your family at the same time.
Yeah. So trying to keep it going. And I'm sure like over time, especially with your kids, like that consistency, I imagine can be helpful. How did you feel like that affected them?
Well, I think it affected them. It was probably for the best, if we didn't continue doing the traditions, like having your family meals and like cooking the big, say you went all out, and there's moments where I've had friends that they would just not celebrate, and so I think it would have affected our relationships, because it is a part where you do come together, and it's important to show that even though they're not there, we're still continuing, and when he comes back, he'll be part of it. You know what I mean? Um, and you just got to keep going through life. Like you don't want to stop living, and I think that's the biggest thing is, am I going to still keep showing my kids what the holidays are for, the meaning of them, or am I not?
And so you mentioned when he comes back, we'll do something. So how did you kind of incorporate your spouse, whether that was in ways while they were gone or coming back?
So one time I think we sent boxes, holiday boxes, so that kind of like made them feel included. But you know, when war took off, we only had letters. We didn't have phones. We couldn't do FaceTime. So that shifted over time. And so you had to change how you did involve them into the process, I guess. So you had to kind of like think about what that looks like. At first, we just stayed together with our closest families. You wrote letters. We had recorded videos that we had for the kids that we would play, and then we would send videos to him. So that was the earlier years. But as time went over, I think one time we sent him like a box that had like it was a turkey hat or whatever, and his like little mill decorations that you could set up, kind of thing.
Yeah, to be apart, be together. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Over time, the access to the service member changes dramatically. So maybe it's easier now, maybe it's not, it's just different, right? So you talked about kind of sticking with your family. So I'm curious how family dynamics are when that extended family, when you're interacting with your extended family and you're also navigating this active duty life that maybe they get, maybe they don't. So I'm curious what that experience was like for you guys with family.
So his father was in the military, retired, so they understood it, not from the perspective that he was always gone, because it was back to back deployments, but they understood a little bit of the lifestyle versus my family. My family, not so much. They were kind of more, I would say, kind of in their own bubble. Like, it's different, I guess. So one, I think, was more helpful, his family, and like, you know taking the extra weight and like handling things, like, because when I would travel for the holidays to Indiana where my father lives, and then our parents, my mother and my stepdad, and then his parents live here outside of Fort Campbell in Tennessee, Kentucky area. So I would actually leave from North Carolina and travel all three places with the
Oh,
four
wow.
kids. So it was a lot, but when I got there, then taking care of meals and, you know, helping just even correct kids or giving me a break. Those are things that were kind of helpful during those times.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I have one kid and we traveled one time and I can't imagine add three more holiday season, you're on your own without your spouse. So yeah, I can imagine just the little things made a big difference in having that support and that understanding. Oh gosh, that stressed me out just listening to you, thinking about traveling all those places. But I mean, I guess that was what was important to you, right? Was to have that family and therefore it was worth it.
Yeah, I've kind of always, I think, spouses take it differently, how they're going to show up in that. And I kind of just kept moving forward,
Mhm.
not like we were living without him, but I had responsibilities, and you're right. Like I wanted my holidays and certain times, even the summer, to be with family and stuff. And so I would make that as top priority.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I said, have to keep living for you, for your kids, for everybody else that's in your life. Can't just, especially if we're talking, you know, deployment after deployment. I mean, you
Right.
can't,
Oh, yeah.
can't
I
just
mean, one time was 15 months, and he was only home probably 8 months in between the back-to-back deployments, especially at the beginning. And then he switched MSs, but they became shorter deployments. So yeah, it was constant.
got to keep going. So I'm trying to think of other things that, whether we're active duty families or even just regular old families, that can be challenging during the holidays. And one thing that's for everybody, I think, is there can be those feelings of loneliness or isolation or even like grief and loss around the holiday season. So I'm curious if that impacted you guys in any way, either you as an individual or your family or your spouse being apart from you.
Yeah, I remember one time he was deployed, and my uncle had passed away from cancer, and the family time was dynamic, was very challenging on my side, and I couldn't travel home, and so you do have to face some of these emotions and like thoughts. I want to say that too, because your mind just goes on alone, and by the time the spouse gets back, either you you didn't discuss it. I don't think you ever bring full circle around. I guess now that you ask that question, like how did you handle that and stuff? So you don't get the support emotionally that you need on either end. I think because you're told to push it to the side. So um, I don't know if we're giving advice, but I now go. I'm very particular about what I ask, and like if something's going on, about what questions, and making sure that we are addressing things and not letting them go by and get too far removed from us that they will surface later, if we didn't go through it. So
Yeah, absolutely. And especially I imagine us not being able to do that for so long, it becomes even more important post service.
it's actually a bad habit.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, so setting good habits before.
Yes. But I mean, to give yourself a break, a learned habit, like exactly like you said, because the culture and the deployments and the service are demanding that both of you are able to separate and stay focused, and you just keep going on and he does his thing. And we hear that a lot, right? It's like it has to be that way to some degree. And I think even you and I had this conversation when we were together a couple weeks ago of like trying to find a better way for couples to communicate so that it's not just all on pause until they come back, but that's hard to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure I figured out the how much is too much.
Mhm.
I definitely think communicating in healthy ways, even if you're just feeling certain way and writing it. We started putting those into practice later on in the career, his career, but that was, you learned that over time. You didn't know that at the beginning. So
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I think most people probably don't, because there's not a lot of prep for you as a couple or you as a family on, or none. I saw your face. No, no prep.
I'm like, prep, no, gosh. And I'm a long-term planner, so I'm like, surely other wars have been through this. Like, people have been through this in other wars, and there's things to learn from. So I'll, start researching anyways and get lost in the
Yeah.
all.
There's got to be a better way. And you guys had a long career to try and figure out, for your own relationship, for your own family, like how to make some of this stuff work. And it's probably why you're still here, still a family unit. But yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about your children, but is there anything else you felt like was either especially challenging for them, whether it be being separated or just anything related to specifically the holiday season as an active duty children?
I mean, it could be that, how depending on how your traditions, how you go about your holiday seasons with your children, it could be a more sensitive time for them. I know that each one of my kids handled the deployment differently, but our youngest went through where he had hives.
Mm.
And so it just made me think like, and even knowing that every kid handled it differently, I would probably be even more, put myself more on a awareness of the holidays are going to be harder and making sure that I know how they're feeling during the seasons and like what way, inviting them to think of what ways to would help them feel part of the family with their dad gone. So I think I would have done that more looking back, but now, it's a little different, you
Yeah.
know.
Like inviting them to think about that. I think that can be a huge help because then you're not just assuming how they're feeling, you're checking in with them and also helping them think of like problem solve. Like how can we address this? How can we make you feel more connected? I love that. And now you have active duty kids of your own. I'm curious, how do the holidays look now?
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. Well, so I just lost recently my grandma and my aunt in like the week span over the summer. And so this year we decided to come home for Thanksgiving. So with the two active duty soldiers, your time is limited, your distance is limited. Um, and this year I really, Joe, my husband and I discussed it. Like, what does it look like with having two kids out, then two kids, and we really want to all of us to be together. But I told him, I was like, these are my expectations, but I just want you to know my expectations, but I know that this may not happen. So two of our kids are not coming home, which are the ones active duty, because there's just too much going on. And, sometimes certain events we'll make sure we go to them. But this year, because of my grandpa being sick and stuff like that, I was just like, I was honest with him and saying that it sucks. I'm gonna be honest because you're almost like an empty nester, but not.
Yeah.
But then you're trying to figure out how this new family unit's gonna look being distant. So we'll probably FaceTime them in. We usually FaceTime. So that's kind of what our Thanksgiving looks like this year. I don't know next year. I should be a grandma next year. So things are already shifting again. So, you know.
Yeah, I've even had some of those own yeah, when babies entered the realm, it changes. We sometimes will go to I'm here in Austin, sometimes we'll go to San Antonio. When my grandmother lived there and she passed last year. And so we're hosting this year, and our family was like, so are you gonna come, in the afternoon down to San Antonio? And they're kind of like, I understand, like you have a baby. And I was like, yeah, no, we can't do that. Like I just want to be home, right? Babies change everything. So yes, and almost congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thanks.
So
So we'll
we'll
see.
see what next year looks like.
It's always shifting. I guess the military does prepare you for that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, and you have to, being a, I guess, driven type A person, I learned early on to be flexible, slow down, just embrace where you're at. Now it's taking 20 years. So for everybody out there, give yourself grace. It's
Yeah.
going to take time.
Yes. Yeah. It's learned after mistakes, which are good because that's how you learn and all sorts of things. But I mean, I think that's the best thing you could say is that learned adaptability and flexibility. And even when you're talking about telling your husband your expectations, right? Like, hey, I know that this might not be met, but I want it to be known so we can see what we can do to get as close to that as possible, right? So, I mean, I think we naturally kind of talked about different things that your family did that helped kind of deal with some of the challenges. Are there any kind of last minute thoughts on things that were helpful as an active duty family to address any of those holiday challenges?
Yeah, I was, thinking about this, and I realized even though we only went to two different bases, it took us a long time to find friends. But once we found our friends, that was a priority too. Like find good friends that we actually did events with and holidays with. I think that's really crucial, even at the beginning state that people put in, like making sure you have one or two friends that like you're just so invested in and you're open with, and you guys celebrate together and kind of encourage each other to do that. Um, I know one time, I don't know if it was the holidays, it could have been, but we would rotate if the husband was gone, the other one was home, you know, going to their house, but we also made sure we gave each other time with their spouse when they would come home. So, yeah, just making sure you have a good supportive system and community around you, even if it's just one or two friends.
Right. Because I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people listening to where family may be totally out of the picture. That might be something they don't have or don't even want to, approach as with the holidays. So that found family. And we know that can be so strong in the military community. So it's great advice. Find that family. All right. So you guys have been out a couple years. So what have you noticed? So I guess that's 2 holiday seasons since y'all have been out. Yep. So what, so fresh, but what, if anything, have you noticed is kind of different now? Are there any new challenges or new, like, amazing things? Like, oh gosh, this was so challenging while we were active duty, and now this cured it, or whatever, like, is there something great that you found or new challenges that you found as you've retired and are navigating post-service life?
So I'll do one of both. The good one first. So having my husband home now for the holidays, and they're home, you're less stressed. Like, and of course my kids are all older, right? But just having their presence around actually just makes a huge difference. I don't think most people talk about that, but I don't know. Your just whole demeanor about the holiday season kind of shifts. Like, I know last year we had to, it was a hot mess through Southwest, but we flew to my daughter in Colorado, and she ended up having to, we got stranded in St. Louis, and she had to drive from Colorado Springs to pick us up on Christmas Eve and then drive back. I couldn't imagine of doing that during active duty, probably by myself, which it would have been totally different. But like, having him navigate these seasons, especially with family dynamics and stuff like that, I just think it's better. It's just more
Yeah,
peaceful.
more peaceful. I love that. Yeah, I mean, the whole extra human that you have this connection with, there's gonna be there's gonna be a change when they're there versus when they're not. So I'm glad to hear that it's a positive one. All right, so that's the good thing. So what's the challenging thing?
I'd say the challenging thing is when the person stays gone for so long, you kind of, the room becomes yours.
Hmm.
The house, the traditions, everything is ran a certain way, and it's ran your way. So I would say the challenge is helping them find their way back into it. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, it happens even with driving, but the holiday season seems like, say you're putting up Christmas lights, or you're just doing these certain things, but you want it a certain way because you've been doing it that way. Now, I don't know if people are experiencing that now because they're not deploying as much, but um working together. I think we were loading the truck coming here. Let's just use that as a practical example. And we were trying to get the gate, and we both had two different ways. And we're both trying to communicate it out, right? So you're learning to re-communicate just the simplest processes you would think, but you weren't given the time to do it. So that could be the challenging part, just the communication and just making sure you're being clear, and pointing out exactly what needs to be said. And when you're trying to navigate so many different things, the holiday season, you got so many people coming in, right? So my daughter's coming in next week. I have friends that are in the military that are coming in week after. I have my mother-in-law living with me, and then I have the two kids and me. So I'm moving into the Christmas season going, all right, what do you think this is going to look like? How do we want to make this look? And then I asked that question with him, and then we asked that question with all parties coming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
It's also a time when people have a lot of opinions, right? I mean, maybe people always do, but definitely people have a lot of opinions. So when you're the home base or not, whatever, and it's kind of having to, exactly like you said, figure out what is the ideal, but then how do we fit in everybody else's ideal?
who wants to do what? When are we doing it? And what do you do when you have 50 people in your house? Well, did you set aside time to run away? Like, my husband's an introvert, so he's thinking 20 people in the house. Where am I going to escape? You know?
Oh,
Um, so we actually talk about those things, like where are we going to make sure that everybody has time out to go away, walk away, and come back, or just little things like that.
And do you feel like, is that just the kind of person he is? Because I know people, some of our post-service spouses who may be dealing with a veteran with PTSD or something like that, that's definitely a factor with them with these holidays. Is that at all what's going on, or do you feel like your family understands that he maybe has the need for that?
So yeah, he was diagnosed with PTSD and TBI. So and knowing and doing as much work as I do to better understand, what he could possibly be going through, you have to educate yourself that as a spouse, one, but two, have those hard conversations, because making sure the environment does support their mental health, I think, is important. I mean, everybody wants that, but I think a lot of things can be more triggering to them than it is a normal person, given what they've been through. So we actually did have that conversation with family coming in and friends coming in. And he was like, well, I want to make sure that we have time just family only before friends come in. And I think I wrote a blog about it, like making sure that we're asking our spouses what it looks like for them and what can we do to better support them with all those people coming in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to apply this. So I actually had to go do that. So yeah, just having that conversation prior, especially if they do, because a lot of people can be overwhelming to him. Like he can go sit in a crowded room, like say he went to Buffalo Wild Wings and just was sitting there watching the game. The Everything around him could be okay and not bothering him in that type of environment, but when it's in his home, it bothers him more. So knowing that, I think, is important.
It is, and that's good that y'all can have that conversation in advance. And I know that I think that's a good, lesson or a piece of advice or whatever people want to take from it for spouses who maybe are acknowledging that that's happening, but maybe not having the conversation. I know my husband has PTSD as well, and that's definitely a factor. He's actually a pretty social person. I see it more with him, like he has a lot of expectations and he doesn't handle when things don't like meet those expectations. He doesn't handle that very well. And so trying to kind of, we have a lot of conversations and communications, like almost like you had just said, of like, here are my expectations. Okay, what are your expectations? But here's how we need to be able to be a little bit more flexible, or like, if this doesn't happen, that's probably not going to happen that way, right? And that's okay. And especially for us, it's our kids' first holiday season. So you're actually reminding me, we probably do need to have this conversation, right? And just make sure I know what his expectations are, know what mine are, and then make sure we're going to be okay. We'll say when, right? When they don't go as planned, because that's probably going to be what happens. So yeah, I mean, communication is key. I think that's the biggest takeaway, one of the biggest takeaways I'm getting from you, and I definitely second, with your spouse, with your family that's coming in. Because yeah, it's, life is stressful, and then holiday season, and then all these other things we're talking about just stack on top of one another. So I think we talked about a strategy. I mean, I think that is the strategy, but anything else that you feel has been unique to post-service life around this time, or something you found really helpful for you and your family?
Yeah, I guess I'll mention, over the years, I realized that, the spouse view of the holidays and gift giving and what that looks like, and financially, I know this is going to be a big, huge topic, but I think it should be addressed. The veteran that's been gone or has been diagnosed with PTSD or anything else can be experiencing guilt, and I think that can be overwhelming in making some of these decisions that they feel like it needs to be over the top or overly big. And I think that realistic is kind of out the window. And that's why it's so important to talk about every, you know, subject matter, like financially, because now we actually talk about like not spending as much money and just focusing on what the value really is that we want to happen during this time. And it's really not materialistic. And that's fine if people are gift givers and that they love to do that. But we know that it's the individual's values on top of the family's values, and then how we all act that out within the family unit. And so that way the holiday is more implemented, more realistic expectations, and that's taken time, because again, like I said, he responded out of guilt a lot, and he would one year bought dirt bikes. I'm like, we don't even have a place for dirt bikes, but you know what I mean? He just wanted to give them the world, and I understood it. Um and from the spouse's perspective, just talking with them about that, like, the kids really do value the relationship more than anything. And I think that is the most important thing. And so when you keep that at the center, that will help you navigate even those other hard conversations.
I love that because yeah, I mean, let's be real, kid loves a dirt bike, but they love their dad, like that's what they want is the time with the dad and time with you and time with any parent that maybe has been, had to have been separated or absent for times. I actually really like that. That's something I think I'm going to use as we think about stuff. Cause yeah, sometimes my husband will go above and beyond and I'm like, whoa, okay. That came, we got that. Great. Okay. I'll pivot a little bit on whatever I'm doing, So people have been asking us what our daughter wants. She's 7 months old, and I'm like, do we need to get her gifts? Like all we do is buy her stuff, and kind of just thinking maybe we just let other people do that. And it's more about just the other traditions and the time together and, invest in those things. So I think that's really cool thinking about that. And that actually leads really nicely into, Emma, you shared from your coaching business, you shared this PDF, kind of a toolkit almost essentially to help people kind of think through some of this things we've been talking about, how to navigate the holidays. And one of those things that I noticed on it was a lot of like exploring those values, what's really important to you, what's important to your family, to kind of help you figure out how you want to go about this and what's best for you as an individual, as a family, etc. So this is a PDF, a guide I'm going to share as we put this episode out for everyone to access. But I'm going to see if there's anything specific from that you'd like to call out or speak more to, so people can kind of get an idea of how that could help them.
Yeah, I mean, so the three things that's going to help everybody navigate the holiday season is the values and boundaries and navigating through what those look like and setting them, because we do want to be around family and we want to have that support, but it just may not be the right season because you're reestablishing what your boundaries are, or just figuring them out. And I know earlier in our relationship that was so important for us when we moved away, I started noticing like, oh, I don't want my kids to be around that, or it's just too much going on, distress in that our extended family, that I don't think it's a good time for our family to go. And I think the husband, the couple walking through those questions is really going to help them, one, establish those lines, and then two, start putting in good, healthy habits, which is another section of questions of how to carry that out and establishing that in their relationships. Because I feel more people get together on the holidays because they want it so much, and then it becomes more of a stress than it needed to be.
Yeah, so not getting what you actually wanted from it.
So yeah, that's a little bit about it, but it really is a reflection and a question guide for the individual and the couples, and even incorporate your kids depending on the age. Our kids are all older, so a lot of these questions are things that I call my kids. We have FaceTime all this on the phone and we discuss this. We all kind of lay it out. Direct communication is one of the top key components for resiliency for the military. And I think these are the times where you need to be the most directive in how you want your family to continue growing together, and especially during the holiday season.
Yep. Direct communication. Say it, embed it, practice it.
Over and over.
It's hard, but it's so worth it, reaping the benefits.
Oh, I will add too, Hannah, on those, the guide, the PDF, there's actually links for people to go to actually do the assessments that are free. Some cost money, but there are free ones out there. And again, that's just additional tools for people to better understand their communication styles, what values look like and things like that. So that is on there as well.
Very cool. So a tool with links to more tools. So you can really explore, get yourself some information, and some tools and strategies to hopefully make the most of this season. And while we're talking about the holiday season, this stuff helps you all the time, no matter what you're navigating. So what a great tool. So yeah, that'll be attached, or I don't know how we're going to do it, but it'll be available as part of releasing this episode so that you guys can access that as well. feel like we have talked so much about like tips, tricks, like good strategies, but I always like to end the session asking if there's just anything you'd like to leave listeners with, whether that's just kind of a piece of wisdom or anything on this topic that you'd like to leave them with.
Yeah, I would say for the military spouse, speaking to them specifically, advocate and know the information, educate yourself as much as you can, and helping your veteran or your active duty member transitioning through whatever he's transitioning through, going through, is going to be vital to the relationship, the marriage, and the family dynamic. So
becoming equipped with everything you possibly can. And there's a lot of stuff out there, which can be overwhelming, but I think it's better to have more at your disposal. It's just about figuring it out. And, you know, that's something, whether it's this podcast or what we do at the Veteran Spouse Network or what a lot of other amazing organizations do, is try to help you guys navigate that so that you can find what you're looking for. So this was amazing. I learned a lot, and you reinforced things that I do know, but maybe don't practice all the time. So I'm going to be taking some of this as we move into the holiday season as well. So I thank you so much. I thank everyone who's listening. I hope you guys got something you can take with you and hopefully make the most of your holiday season with your partner, your family, your found family, your loved ones. We hope it's an enjoyable time for you all, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, Emma. Thanks again for joining us on the Veteran Spouse Network podcast, brought to you in collaboration with Coming Home Well. We thank you for listening today and hope today's session left you feeling a little more connected or gave you some insight into the experiences of our military and veteran families. Don't forget to check us out at veteranspousenetwork.org to learn more about how our military and veteran families can receive the support they deserve.